also for your opening statements. Mr. Younts, you are first.
Yes. I'm Chris Younts. I'm running the Republican primary to represent our 11th Congressional District. I'm from San Angelo. Been married 29 years, have 2 grown children and a grandchild. I grew up in the cattle business, ran a pecan orchard. I was a professional firefighter for 11 years until a bull and I had an argument over going in a trailer one day, and he won the argument. And when I got out of the hospital, I didn't go back to the fire department. I own an independent insurance agency in San Angelo now. I'm a businessman. And as a businessman, I have some qualifications that seem to be in pretty short supply in Washington these days. Number 1, I still remember how to balance a checkbook. And number 2, I understand you can't keep borrowing and spending money that you don't have. And in case anyone is wondering, I'm not real politically correct. Yes, I have a valid birth certificate from Bell County, Texas.
Mr. Younts, thank you. Mr. Bowen, you're next.
Thanks everyone
Right,
thank you. Thanks for having me here. Appreciate y'all's attendance, everyone who's listening and watching via the other media that we currently have operating here. 60 seconds is precious little time for us to go into any detail at all. My name is Wade Brown. I live in Brown County, Texas. I spent the last dozen years on active duty in the Marine Corps. I have been in business for myself off and on since the middle 1990s. And the bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, in this particular election, for this particular office, you do have some distinct choices that you can make. You can vote for someone who has an incumbent, has voted for $3.1 trillion of debt limit increases. Mr. Conaway has done so. That's just a factual statement. Or you have an alternative. You can vote for somebody who's going to be a bulldog in the U.S. House, who will hold the line for you and for our children when it comes to the issues of most importance to our nation today. There is a choice for you to make. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. I look forward to getting to know y'all better.
Robert.
Well, you may have both answered the first question, but we'll give you maybe a little more time with that. We'll start again with Chris. Of course, Mike Conaway is our currently serving representative, conservative Republican. He served several terms in office. What makes you different, and what makes you think you can do things different in Washington?
Well, Mike argues a lot about he wants to move up within the party. He wants to be on a committee. Well, what that leads to is a go along to get along mentality. And instead of representing us, the constituents, he represents what will move him up in the party. I think one of the classic examples we all know about was the TARP bailout. We as his constituents overwhelmingly supported the free market. We didn't want our taxpayer dollars redistributed to mismanaged financial institutions. You know, by doing that, not only did they contradict the model of the free market, they exacerbated the problem. If you look at the FDIC failed bank list, we have more banks, small and medium-sized banks, fail since the TARP bailout than any time since the S&L crisis. So what we've done is made the problem worse. Now we have fewer small and medium-sized banks to pick up the slack.
Mr. Younts, thank you. Mr. Brown.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Mr. Conaway served several terms in office. What makes you different, and how would you operate differently in Washington?
Thank you for the question. I would operate very differently than Mr. Conaway. I have said so much in my pledges and in writing. For one, I won't vote for debt limit increases or any kind of unbalanced budget. You can't say that you're for a balanced budget amendment and then vote for continuing resolutions that continue to spend us into the highest debt to GDP ratio we've had since World War II. You simply can't do that. So I've pledged that I simply will not vote in favor of any continuing resolution, spending bill, budget that is unbalanced unless the president can show me how he or she can, during their current term of office, get to a balanced budget within 4 hours in writing. If they can show that to me, then I will vote for a budget that's less than balanced, but only if I can see a clear plan out of the woods that we're in right now. How much time do I have left, please? 10 seconds?
5 seconds.
5 seconds. Yes, that wraps that answer up.
Sorry, you're out of time.
This is for both of you. There is tremendous animosity and a lack of cooperation, obviously, in Washington, D.C. between Democrats and Republicans. What would you do to bring the two sides together? I'll start with you, Chris.
Well, I think we've come together too much. I think it's time to stand on principles. You know, we need to stand on the principles and values that made us the greatest, most prosperous, highest standard living of nation in the world. And we shouldn't compromise those principles. And among those were the inclusion of God, free markets, a constitutionally limited federal government, fiscal responsibility, which is totally an unheard of word now, personal accountability, and we have to quit promoting government dependency in our business sector, as we just talked about in the bailouts, and in our individual lives. We are promoting government dependency instead of personal accountability. I truly believe if we will go back to these principles and values in our decision making and in our policy making decisions in Washington, our turnaround in this country will be remarkably fast.
Thanks for the question. It is a very central question. There's two basic philosophies, and they're both kind of right. One of them is that you have to compromise a little bit in order to make things happen, because you are sitting with a whole lot of diverse backgrounds. I mean, people from New York and other foreign countries are up there in the House. So the bottom line is I have worked with people from various backgrounds, both in the government and civilian sectors at fairly high levels. To the extent that I can bring people on board, I will do so. But my goal right now is to get together with like-minded people who will stand on principle, and we will form a nucleus and grow that nucleus until we have a majority of votes so that we can protect this country from what's happening to it right now. That's the only way out, ladies and gentlemen. We cannot compromise. Mr. Younts is right on that. Compromise has gotten us into a great big mess. We've got to have a line to draw and stand by. I guarantee you I will stand by the line that I have established. Thank you.
Gentlemen, we have a question for both of you from our OA Interactive desk, and this is the question. Mr. Younts, we'll start with you. In trying to curtail national spending, what specific local project or earmark supported by Congressman Mike Conaway would you do away with?
Well, I'll tell you one example. I fully support the free market, free enterprise, and I'm all for using CO2 for enhanced oil recovery. It's old technology. It's been around for years. I know y'all built a coal plant here. I'm all for that if the private sector does that. But we had a federal grant come in to give money to that. Well, there we go. All right? We are injecting the government into an area that should be solely the free market. The oil industry, if they need the CO2, which you do for the enhanced oil recovery, let the free market provide that. You can't take money from someone in San Angelo or Granbury or Brownwood, as bad as this sounds to y'all, but we can't support the oil industry. We have our own industries to support. You have to do that, and that is one example I can use.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
I would like to categorically reject the old so-called political conventional wisdom statement that all politics is local. There is no such thing as a local project in the U.S. House of Representatives. If you folks want local projects supported from your U.S. government, then you're going to be asking, number one, for U.S. government intervention. And number two, you're also going to have to be ponying up money for a walking path in Portland, Oregon, or for some other project that has no interest to us. 435 members of the House, 100 members of the Senate, that's 535 people, and Mr. Conaway, unfortunately, has a horrible record in this regard. The last 3 fiscal years he submitted earmarks, they were over $20 million per fiscal year. Multiply that by 535, you have a spending bonanza. That's how these folks are tied in, and it's unfortunate. It's the wrong way to go, and the bottom line is no local projects. We're a federal government at the U.S. House level, and I'm a free enterprise person as well. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you both. You now have 2 minutes each for your closing statements. Mr. Younts, you will be first.
You know, we talk a lot about the biggest challenges we face as a nation. I'm going to tell you the biggest crisis I think we face as a nation is a lack of leadership. We have a government we can't afford. All right? We have spending that's out of control, and our Constitution is being shredded. And all I hear is compromise. Now, we've compromised ourselves into a $16 trillion debt, a $1 trillion a year deficit. There's not a lot of room left to compromise here. Compromise is not the answer. I think that we have 2 basic questions this election cycle. And number one, as Americans, does this document still matter? It's the Constitution. And since I'm running in the Republican primary, I think we need to ask ourselves, does the Republican platform and the principles we say we stand for, do they really matter, or is that just rhetoric? So I can sum this up simply. If you believe that more government is the answer, that bailouts, debt ceiling deals, goofy 12-member super committees, earmarks, and more business as usual is a solution to the problems we face, then vote for the incumbent, because that's his record. Because I will not vote for bailouts. I will not vote to raise the debt ceiling. I will not advocate my responsibility to goofy 12-member super committees. I won't request earmarks, and I will not compromise on the principles and values that made this nation great. Now look, there's a lot of reasons and ways to argue for the status quo, but I look at it this way. If your horse isn't swimming, if the one you brung won't dance, or if your dog isn't hunting, it's time to get a new horse, a new dance partner, and a new dog. I ask for your support.
Mr. Brown, you get to follow that.
No, that's fine. I enjoy listening to Chris talk. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I want to thank you all for being here. This is quite a crowd. I frankly don't usually see crowds this large. It's very heartening. And again, for all the folks who are listening and watching, thank you so much, because this is going to be a team effort on the U.S. government level. It's going to require all of us to re-examine how we have prioritized our lives, and I feel very deeply that unless we are all willing to become invested in our own self-government in ways that we have never done before, our government will keep going the way that it's going. I want to make a positive statement to you. All the biggest problems that we have, they're all self-inflicted, which means that with the change of our own will, because this government and this nation still belong to us, we can change our direction. And I have a question that goes along with that, and that is, how much is your vote? How much does your vote cost? Is there a dollar figure attached to your vote? Because the other positive statement I'll tell you is this: any person can be beaten in an election, even a powerful incumbent who's very well funded, because elections are still won by votes and they're still won by voters. So I would very respectfully ask you to please go to all of our websites, compare us as candidates, vote your conscience, be invested in your government once again. Our country's hurting, and no 1 or 2 or 3 or 435 people can fix it. It's going to take all of us. So thanks again, and appreciate your consideration. Again, my name is Wade Brown. I'm running to be your U.S. representative. Thank you.
Chris, Younts, Wade Brown, thank you both very much.